What's up, you guys? It's Peter here, and today I want to go over a personal finance flowchart that has helped me along the way over the years. And it covers a variety of things, and there's sort of a small version of the flowchart as well as a much larger, more detailed version of the flowchart as well. So we are going to start with the small version, and I'm also going to show you where I found this information, and then step by step we're going to go through it. So hopefully this will be of use to you as well. So let's dig into it. All right, so what we have here, this is the small version. So it's broken up into all of these different steps. And as you can see, the emergency fund will be the first step. So the very first thing that you should do when you're just starting out is basically build up your emergency fund. And it should be somewhere between 3 to 6 months worth of savings, or rather I should say worth of expenses in your savings account. So that way it is a liquid fund, so that means it is easily accessible to you. It should be in a checking account, perhaps in a savings account, but you don't want to be investing that money because you want to have easy access to it. So 3 to 6 months worth of expenses. That's your very first step. Then after that, maybe your company that you're working for has a retirement plan, so something along the lines of a 401k. And oftentimes your employer will match your contribution up to a certain percentage. So try to at least contribute to that plan up into the match. So later on, you can try to max it out if you need to, or if you want to. But first, let's try to get that match, because in essence, it's free money. It's money that your employer will basically put up to a certain amount when you put some money into the plan. After that, we have the debts. So if you have any debts, right? Now, some debts are good debts and some debts are bad debt. Not all debt is bad. But what you definitely want to try to get rid of is your high interest debt. So any debt that has an interest rate of over 10%, let's say, credit card debt or other kinds of, really high, I don't know, maybe loans that you've had from in the past that are high interest, those you're gonna try to pay off early or first. So there are different techniques to do that. There's the Avalanche method and the Snowball method. We'll talk about those in a moment, but try to get rid of those debts first. Now, what about a debt, let's say like a mortgage, right? Well, then at that point, it depends what kind of interest rates you got on that. Right now in 2020, the interest rates are really low. And so anything over 4% generally is a good idea to try and pay that off. Anything less than 4%, you may have to evaluate if it gives you a psychological comfort or not, to pay it off early. For some people, they want to be completely debt-free and they want to pay off their mortgage early, which is fine. But at the same time, perhaps that money can be, working harder for you when it is actually invested in the stock market, earning you a higher interest rate. So it could maybe, on average, the S&P 500 on average returns 7% over long periods of time. So if you are able to borrow money at 2.5%, 3%, 3.5%, 4%, that obviously is a lot lower than the 7% that you can make in the stock market. So maybe the better use of your money is to basically let it be and grow in the stock market. Anyway, that is a personal choice. So next up are the IRAs. So the IRA stands for Individual Retirement Account, and we have the Roth IRA as well as the traditional IRA. Now I've modified over here the contribution amounts because this chart was generated in 2014, and so I've updated it a bit for 2020. And so the amounts have gone up since then because they do sort of a cost of living adjustment. The IRS, the government, does a cost of living adjustment. So what originally was a contribution limit of up to $5,500 per year, in 2020 is now $6,000 per year. Now, you have the Roth IRA and you have the traditional IRA. They are a little bit different, and I think we're going to cover that in a different video. But the point being is that they are an individual retirement account. And if you've earned some income during the year, you can contribute to those accounts. And they are sometimes, the traditional one is tax deductible up to a certain amount. And it is also linked to how much your earned income is. So we're going to dig into that a little bit more once we go through the detailed chart. But for now, the Roth IRA or the traditional IRA are additional individual retirement accounts that you can contribute about $6,000 a year into. Next, we have again the company 401k, but this time the company 401k is representing the full amount that you can contribute, at least pre-tax, right? So that's $19,500 in 2020. Now again, that just like the IRA accounts, that changes over the years. There will be a cost of living adjustment that comes in. So I don't know when you're going to be watching this video, but make sure to check out the IRS contribution limits for the current year, because over time they tend to go up. So next, we have savings and investments, so additional savings. So beyond the individual retirement account, beyond the 401k, the pension saving, what else is there out there in terms of an individual brokerage account, or maybe something like college savings, right? So the 529 is a special account for that kind of stuff. But then it goes into individual saving accounts, individual brokerage accounts that cover investments in stocks as well as investments in bonds. So this is sort of the small version of the chart. So hopefully, this is sort of giving you a step-by-step process. Now let's go and bring up the big brother of this chart. So this is probably my favorite chart. And actually, before we do that, let's show you where you can find more information about that as well. So here I have loaded up the personal finance subreddit. And I know that for most of you, or maybe watching this it's a US and American audience, but there are actually charts over here if you scroll down a little bit, and it's going to talk about all these flow charts and so on. And this is the personal finance subreddit. So if ever you want to get to it, I'll post it in the comments down below, but reddit.com, r personal finance, the wiki, and then common topics, and that's how you can get to it. So what I'm wanting to get to over here is the graphical version of these various steps, and that is the flowchart. Now I've already loaded the flowchart up, but you also have a non-US versions. So if you are in Australia, Canada, the European Union, Ireland, New Zealand, or the United Kingdom, other users over here on Reddit have made charts that sort of follow similar trajectories, but obviously there will be different local laws and local taxes and local pensions, or all kinds of different plans available for your region. So might be worth checking that out if you're in a different region. So I'm going to cover the one for the US today. So let's dig into it. So over here, this was the one, this is the short one, but notice the colors, right? So red, yellow, green, blue, dark blue, and purple. These color values are going to come back. So this is the big chart. So here, if I zoom out, right, it's a little bit, this is the overview. So I'm going to go and zoom in closer so that we can kind of dig in. But notice that those same color values here at the top come back, right? And that is just so that there is a bit of consistency between the small chart and the big chart. So, and then I have a bunch of IRS links open as well, just sort of to check. But I've made myself a quick cheat sheet so we can dive into that as well in terms of limits, contribution limits, and such. So let's bring up this big chart now. Oops, wrong layer. Let's bring up the big chart here and let's start to dive in. So what I want to do next is I'm going to zoom in a little bit and let's go check this out. So here it's the same kind of phases, right? So this is the personal income spending flowchart for the United States. So let's have a look. All right, so again, the first step will be to budget and reduce expenses. So we haven't really talked about that in the previous step, because budgeting, it all starts with that. That is your cash flow in essence. So we got to make sure that we've got the budget under control. The next step, build an emergency fund. We talked a little bit about that, but over here, we're going to break that up into a small emergency fund and then a slightly larger emergency fund, because initially when you just start out, you might not have a lot of money. So step by step. The next step will be employer-sponsored matching funds. So this can be, again, that sort of pension fund or that 401k fund to contribute to that. Next, we have paying down the high moderate interest in debts. So same kind of idea, paying down your debts, right? And ideally paying down the highest interest one so that you can get rid of those high interest debts quicker. Next, over here, we have saving for retirement in an IRA and higher education expenses. So this is where if you are able to have a bit of additional savings, you can put that into that individual retirement account. And the higher education expenses, that can be in relation to the college savings, a master's, maybe an MBA, all of those kinds of things, because as we see later, the 529 plan that will be mentioned can be used for other people, like a nephew or a daughter, a brother, actually not a brother, but a kid, or but it can also be used for yourself. So yeah, also useful. Then over here, save more for retirement. So that is really when we are starting to max out certain accounts. So that is the contribution, for instance, to the 401k up to that limit. Now we'll talk about the limits once we get to that stage as well. And then over here, step 6, save for other goals and advanced methods. So this is the final stage, right? And so eventually I'll probably make some more videos over this sort of final stage. This is really where you're going to start working very tax optimized and also start investing quite a bit of money. So let's get through it. So step 1, creating the budget. So this is fundamental to a sound financial footing, right? It is knowing where your money is going. Budgeting helps you see your sources of income, less your expenses. So as I said before, right, your income less, so income less expenses, what is that? That is your cash flow, right? So it is going to be extremely important that you get a grasp of your cash flow. Now, later on, I will probably do a video on specifically a budgeting spreadsheet and tracking your cash flow, because if you have an understanding of your cash flow, from there you can direct all the amounts of money and start to automate certain things, whereby certain savings automatically get taken out of your accounts and start building up certain things. Anyway, cash flow is going to be absolutely crucial. And not just in the beginning, throughout your entire sort of financial life. Next, we have over here, pay the rent or the mortgage, including renters or homeowners insurance if required. So obviously you gotta have a place to live. Maybe if you live with your parents, great, but maybe at some point you're going to move out, have your own place. You're gonna need to be able to pay the rent, the mortgage, once you buy a house or a condo or so. So that's going to be the first thing to pay off. Next, we have buying food and groceries, right? So over here, depending on the severity of your situation and needs, you may wish to prioritize utilities before this note. So that means these two, maybe to some extent, you can kind of sort of swap them if necessary. It depends a little bit. But it's kind of, they're both essential, right? I mean, food is essential, but also, power, water, heat, toiletries. I almost would put internet to some extent in there. Although if you really need to, you could maybe go to a library and get access to internet there. So, once you have taken care of your, your needs, your essentials, then you can move on to the next steps. So here, pay income earning expenses. Let's say, you work downtown, but you live in the suburbs. Well, you're going to need to be able to have a car or a way of maybe ride the bus or the train or the metro to get to downtown. So you need to be able to pay for your travel expenses, as well as potentially, here's the internet. I would say that is pretty crucial these days. There's a lot of jobs that have also online components to them, or even if you're applying to jobs through LinkedIn or other ways. But again, internet can also be, you can get it through your phone. It's just not that, that easy to work it. So anything required to continue earning income, that could be also equipment, tools, utilities, like basically hammers, or if you have a craft or skill that you're working, could be certain clothing as well. So all of those kind of could be, like business style clothing, as well as, worker outfits. All right, next up, pay the healthcare. So in the US, oftentimes healthcare is linked to an employer, but if your employer does not offer you healthcare, then you may need to pay that yourself out of pocket. So that can be quite a large expense if you have to pay by yourself. But oftentimes, as I said, it is kind of linked to your employment as well, especially if you're working full-time. If you have part-time employment, then it'll depend on how many hours that you're working. And even then, sometimes the employer will not cover your healthcare. So that is quite a significant cost, and that is important, especially because healthcare in the US can get really expensive, especially when hospitals and medication is involved. So definitely something to make sure that you have insurance, that you have coverage. because otherwise this cost can really balloon and get so much larger. All right, the next step, make minimum payments on all debts and loans. So this just makes sure that you're not going to get additional fines, right? If you have a late payment and you haven't paid a credit card, at least the minimum payment on a credit card, for instance, you might get fined. And that is literally money that is getting thrown out, because the banks will try to fine you for a late payment or for not paying, or that kind of thing. So my recommendation is to try to pay off your credit card every month if you can, in full, if you can. If you cannot yet pay it off in full, then you're going to have to pay the minimum, right? And so the same for student loans, credit cards. So just make sure that your debt and your interest on that debt is covered. So those minimum payments, gotta make sure that's covered. Next up, this is where we start to build that small emergency fund. So over here, $1,000. $1,000 covers some things, but not a lot, right? So it's going to cover, the bare minimum of an emergency fund, or 1 month's worth of expenses, whichever is greater. Use a savings or checking account. Now, again, that savings or checking account is important because you want to be able to have quick access to that money. It really serves the purpose of covering for any kind of emergency. All right, so next up, pay any non-essential bills in full. So now we're talking cable, internet, phone, so that these bills basically they go away. They don't keep lingering. They don't, become late payments, and then for whatever reason maybe your internet gets shut off, right? I mean, that would be pretty horrible. So next, we're going to start looking into retirement accounts. So this is, does your employer offer a retirement account with an employer match? So that employer match, again, if it has an employer match, that's over here the question, specifically the match portion. If yes, then contribute to the amount needed to get the full employer match, but nothing above that amount. So that would mean, maybe you put in, if you can, maybe a couple of $1,000. This is on a yearly basis, right? So maybe you put in a couple of $1,000 and your employer will match up to a certain percentage. So maybe they will, if you put in 5,000, they might put in 3,000, something like that, right? But the point being is that this is kind of like a free raise, a free additional bonus on your paycheck if you make use of that. Because even if you don't actually invest that money, but you simply just contribute, well, the employer match is going to be additional money for you. So it'll increase the amount of money that ultimately will come your way. So definitely try to match or contribute to the match, right? So here, contribute the amount needed to get the full employer match, ideally, but nothing more than that match, right? And the reason why is because you may still have other higher needs than that. This over here is free money. So definitely free money, take it, right? If your employer offers it. But if they don't, right? Let's just move the graph a little bit. Just a little bit like this. There we go. Alrighty. And yeah. So if they don't offer a match, then you basically go straight to paying off your high interest. So this is that 10%, right? So here, debt with an interest rate of 10% or higher. Now, what is the kind of debt that causes that kind of interest? I mean, this is definitely credit card debt is one of those, right? We're talking, sometimes 17% interest rates, 19% interest rates, 20% interest rates or higher. So credit cards are notorious for having really high interest rates. So be extremely careful, because that can very quickly compound against you. So, try to pay off that debt as soon as possible. And so now there are two ways. So if you have that debt, there are two ways of doing it. So there's either the Avalanche method or there is the Snowball method. So what's the difference? Well, the Avalanche method will go after paying off the debt which has the highest interest rate first. So if you've got, say 2 loans, and one loan has got, let's say over here, we've got, $1,000 loan, and the interest rate is, something high, right? So something like 17%, right? So that's pretty high. What about having another loan here? Let's say this is only 500. But the interest rate is maybe, let's say 5%, something like this. which one should you be paying off first, right? That's the question, right? And so the Avalanche method is going to say, well, the one with the highest interest rate, here the 17%, should be paid off first. That's the Avalanche method. So why? Because eventually it will save you the most money if you pay off the highest interest one first. I should say though, before you actually pay that off, remember to pay off those minimum payments, right? So on both loans, you probably need to at least pay 5% of the $500, so you got to pay that. And you also have to pay the 17% on the $1,000, you got to pay that. And if you've got some more money left, right, to pay off further, then definitely with the Avalanche method, it would be the $1,000 one first. Okay, what about the Snowball method, right? Well, the Snowball method is basically the opposite, in the sense that, well, it's not the opposite, but it's more based off of the balance of the loan. So the thinking here is, again, you got to serve your interest first. So you got to pay off the 17% of 1,000 first, the 5% of 500 first, but then any additional money basically goes to whichever loan has the lowest balance. Right, so that means you would basically be paying off the $500 first. Now, why would you do that? Because it only has a 5% interest rate and the other one has a 17% interest. Now, the thinking here is that this is a psychological step in the right direction to keep you on track. Because if you wanted to, we could easily put some zeros behind this, right? This becomes $10,000 or $100,000 and $5,000 or $50,000. And with those large amounts, it can be kind of almost like swimming against the current if you are trying to pay off this this really large loan first. It might be more psychologically rewarding to see that, oh, okay, I've cleared one of my balances, and so step by step you're going to clear these balances. Now again, from pure mathematical financial point of view, that is not the smart thing to do. But from a psychological point of view, and especially people that do have debts like that, it might be worth paying off one small debt after another, and just clear one account after another. So that's the difference between the Avalanche method and the Snowball method. So the Snowball method would clear the $500 because it has the lowest balance, and then the $1,000, whereas the Avalanche is going to go after the loan which has the highest interest rate. Okay, cool. So let's say you've paid off your high interest debt. Great. Next step, we're going to say over here, increasing that emergency fund to 3 to 6 months of living expenses. So now 3 to 6 months, that at least covers you just in case something happens, if you have to move to a different place, move to a different city for a different job or things like that. And again, in that savings are checking account so that it is liquid, that you have easy access to that money. If your car breaks down, that will help you to sort of, in an emergency, either rent a car or get a new one, a small one maybe, but it will give you some more options. Okay, so after that, now we're talking about the next debt payments, right? So this is basically the 4 to 5% interest. That's kind of, sort of, getting into that scenario here, but this is like any kind of car loans, for instance, right? That's typical for this kind of stuff. Maybe you've bought a computer, maybe things like that. Maybe you've bought I don't know, some other kind of things that you have, or you're paying for a single course somewhere, some education. Now, excluding mortgage, right? Mortgages are huge. I mean, they tend to be quite, especially in the US, they tend to be quite large amounts. But right now in 2020, the interest rates are low, so they're kind of 2.5, 3, 3.5, somewhere in that area, depending on the term, the length of the loan. And so maybe paying off your mortgage that early is not the best idea, because again, that money could be better making more money for you in the stock market, right? So yeah, so let's keep going. So here, do you have any debt? Yes. Evaluate again the merits of the Avalanche method. We already talked about that, the Snowball method, and their advantages in your personal, financial and psychological situation, and apply according to pay off these debts. Okay, but still, it's still a good idea to pay off your debts, right? Better to have no debts, especially if they're still at the 4 or 5% level, than having debts. All right, but let's say you have now paid off your debts. So no, you do not have any debts anymore. Next, we're going to look at evaluating the merits of a Roth versus traditional IRA in the context of your personal finance situation and max the yearly contribution accordingly. Okay, so in the context of your personal financial situation, what does that mean? Well, that means how much money do you make, right? Is it something Do you make enough money to continue contributing? You basically, often that happens once you've paid off your debt. Well, all that cash flow that used to go to paying off your debt now might free up a little bit. And so you are able to try at least to max the yearly contributions. So let's bring in our little cheat sheet over here. I've kind of written this down whereby we can see what those limits are. So here in 2020, the IRA contribution limits, if you were less than 50 years old, was $66,000, right? If you're over 50 years old, then you can do an additional, a little bit more. It's $7,000. Now, there are other limits to it as well. And so one of those limits is based off of your AGI. So that's your modified adjusted gross income. What is that? Well, basically, this is how much money do you earn, right? And there are some limits in the sense that if you are going after a contribution for a Roth IRA, for instance, if you're single versus if you are married, it's not the same limit. So if you're single, you can contribute up to, if you're earning less than $124,000, you can basically contribute the full $6,000. But once you start earning more than $124,000, it is that contribution is starting to phase out. So basically it's going to be a reduced amount between $124,000 and $139,000 a year. Now, for a lot of people, this represents a lot of money, right? There are ways to still contribute to this, and we'll talk about those maybe later. It's called a backdoor Roth IRA contribution, and you can Google this. Maybe this warrants a video by itself, because that's sort of a bit of a workaround, really. I mean, there's a reason why they call it backdoor, but it's a bit of a workaround to still be able to somehow contribute to the Roth IRA if you make more than this. So the next step also, same with the married side of things. So for married couples, it's 196 is the limit. And so that basically means not 6,000, but it'll be for each person, it'll be 12,000 together, right? So 6,000 for each person, so 12,000 together. If you, as a couple, make less than $196,000, and then it starts to phase out again. So if you make more than $206,000 as a married couple, you can no longer contribute to the Roth IRA, unless if you use the back door, right? So, okay, let's keep going. So now that we sort of are a bit aware of the maximum and the yearly contributions and the income limits, let's keep going. I will post also, together with this, in the description down below, the links to the IRS website of where you can read up more specifically, for your situation, because there are other plans and other kind of limits as well. Okay, so next up here, are you expecting any large required, and I think this is really the key word here, required purchases of personal investments in the near future? So college, yeah, big cost in the US, right? Can easily, if you have a grant or a sponsorship, great, but otherwise can easily add up. Professional certifications, so any kind of like CFAs or those kind of certifications, they can, or maybe for engineers, or maybe for pilots, licenses of sort, for doctors maybe, or insurance costs. I don't know. There's all kinds of required purchases at times. A car so you can get to work, that is technically a required. So when we're hinting at required, right, we're talking really about needs, right? And so, what are we not talking about? Well, we're not talking about the other one, which is wants, right? And so this is the difference between something absolutely necessary versus something nice to have. Yeah. So anything to do with wants, something nice to have, you want to try to reduce that a little bit until you've kind of got your needs in place, right? So your needs need to be covered, your absolute essentials need to be covered before you can try thinking about your wants. Like, it would be nice to go on a holiday to Hawaii, but that is a want, right? That is not an essential thing, unless maybe if you're flying there for work or so. But yeah, anyway, so next, if you've basically started saving for these expenses, right? Save the amount needed for these expenses in a savings or checking account. So the savings or checking account has to do with it being near, right? In the near future. So again, near being the key word. So if you have something that is going to happen in 2 or 3 years, then you might actually put it into maybe a combination of a CD, right, a cash deposit, or maybe a bond and stock account mixture, right? So something that is a little bit more stable than, let's say, 100% equity, or just a high yield savings account, right? So that's also an option. Okay, so yes, that goes through. So now we're basically saving, or if you don't have any savings, or rather you don't have any, I should say, purchases or personal investments coming up, then let's see what's next. So here, are you currently saving at least 15% of your pre-tax income for retirement? Okay, so 2 things, right? So on average, unfortunately, a lot of people don't start saving for their retirement until they're much older, until they're in their 40s, maybe 50s. That's when they start to think about retirement. Now, this, so that's the first thing. First thing is, the earlier you can start saving for your retirement, the better. Because the problem is that a lot of people think of retirement as an age, to be of retirement age, but it's actually not an age. It is a financial state, right? If you are having enough money to be able to, never work in your life, you could be retired. Now, whether you want to be retired or not, that's a different question, and we'll get to that later in the graph. But the point being is that it is not necessarily an age, because some people, if they haven't planned for their retirement, they might be working even beyond the traditional retirement age, even beyond 60, 65, even 70, right? So the goal here, right, is to also save a good amount of your income. So for a good goal would be 15%. Now, if you don't get there, right, so total contributions to all retirement accounts, that includes the IRA, notice that you may need to save more if you are behind on retirement savings. So what does that mean? Again, if you're behind on retirement savings, well, maybe if you only start saving late in life, luckily the IRS does allow for catch-up contributions to some extent, but you will have missed out on some compound interest, right, on some gains. So let's see, are you saving at least, let's say no, right? Let's say if that is not the case. So let me just move that again. Alrighty, good. So there we go. All right, let's say you are currently not saving 15%, right? So the next thing is, does your employer offer a 401k, 403b, or a similar retirement plan into which you could save more money? So this means really try to max it out. So if you before you were only contributing maybe, I don't know, a couple of $1,000 up to that match, well, that means now you're going to start upping that amount to reach the full amount. So what is the full maximum limit? We covered it before. It was $19,500 for the year of 2020, right? So later on we'll talk about other situations whereby actually there are higher limits. There is the maximum limit for the 401k. The current limit that you're aware of is $19,500, but for 2020, the actual maximum limit is $57,000. That is the total limit. And we'll talk about that at the very end, because that's obviously a lot more money to potentially save. And that's also in certain scenarios. Okay, so next up, okay, let's say, if they do offer that 401k, right? So here, yes, increase the contributions until you have reached that 15% pre-tax income being saved for retirement. Great, all right, just return, all right, okay, great. If they don't offer it, right, that's also an option. Then you're going to have to try to do it yourself. So maybe you're self-employed. Well, there are solo 401ks, so an individual 401k or a solo 401k, same thing. A SEP IRA or a simple IRA to reach that 15% pre-tax income saved. If you're not self-employed, contribute to a taxable account to reach this goal. So far we've been talking all of this, right? We've been talking about special accounts in the sense that an IRA, a Roth IRA, a 403b, a 401k, those are special sort of tax advantaged accounts often. But if you have no access to those, well, then you don't really have another choice but to open an individual taxable account. So that is with a brokerage, an account that won't have any tax advantages, but yeah, it'll still be better to sort of start saving and start investing your money. All right, so let's go back up. So basically now we've reached our 15%. Yes, all right, so here we're gonna follow yes. And now we're going to start talking about some of the special accounts. So one of those accounts is an HSA. An HSA stands for a health savings account. So the first thing in order to qualify for that is, do you have a qualified high deductible health plan and are thus eligible for investable HSA? So not everybody can get that. That's the first thing. So this is where, sometimes, so therefore it's nothing bad, but if you can't get it, you're going to have to do something else, right? You're moving on to the next step. But if you can get it, and you tend to be able to get it if you're on a qualified high deductible healthcare plan, right? And oftentimes employers will contribute some money to that plan for you as well. It could be $100, maybe $300, maybe $500, something along those lines. And you contribute to that plan as well through your paycheck. Now, so here we can see the next step, if they have it, yes, max the yearly HSA contribution. So how much is that? That is around $3,300. Maybe it's a little bit more. Maybe it's now $3,500. I don't know exactly the amount right now off heart, but it's, around $300 for the year in 2020. And that basically is spread out over your paychecks as well. So that money is going into an account and will basically accumulate in that account. Oftentimes there are investable HSAs. So that basically means you can specify a fund, just like with your 401k or your IRA account, to invest into. So an S&P 500 index fund or a Vanguard total stock market fund, something along those lines. So that could be an option. Now there's another account that oftentimes can cause confusion, and that is the FSA. Now the FSA stands for Flexible Savings Account, and that is not the same, right, as an HSA. An FSA is useful, right, in the sense that an FSA is an account that you can contribute some money for, and it's pre-tax money that you contribute to, and then you can use that money throughout the year, throughout 1 year, to buy all kinds of medical supplies, right? So if you some medication or some bandages or whatever it is, that's useful for an FSA. With an HSA, it will roll over to the next year and the year after that and so on. It basically, an HSA is an account that is yours. Even if you change employers, that money will still be yours. An FSA, after 1 year, basically you have to use that money or you lose that money. I think there's a certain amount of money that you can roll over, but it is a limited amount, right? So, and yeah. The other thing is, so why would you use an investable HSA for savings and retirement? Why is that the case? Well, the HSA is one of the best accounts to do it. Why? Because it is triple tax advantaged. What does that mean? We haven't really talked about that yet. But so triple tax advantaged. What does that mean? Well, the first advantage is that the money goes in, right? It goes into your account pre-tax. Okay, cool. So you don't have to pay any money on the money that you don't have to pay any tax on the money that goes into that account. The second part of it is that it will grow tax-free. So whilst the money is in that account, it grows tax-free. So whilst the money is in that account, if let's say you've invested into a fund and that fund pays out dividends, right? Or maybe you've, you've bought some stock in it and you sell it, you've got some capital gains. That means those capital gains are not taxed. In a regular account, you would have to pay capital gains taxes, both on the dividends as well as on any, sales that you've done. So with this account, you don't have to do that. It is completely shielded from any taxes. And number 3 over here is that when you take your money out, right? Here's the condition. If the money is taken out for valid medical reasons, it can also, you don't have to pay taxes on it. So basically out, let's say for medical bills or medical reasons, it's also tax-free. Now, if you take it out just for regular use, then that doesn't count, right? So, but basically for medical reasons, because it's still health account, it's going to be useful. Now, here's something to consider, right? Since this limit isn't that high, it's only like, well, it's $3,300. One of those medical reasons, right, that you can use it for is a retirement home or a assisted living home, where you may, when you're older, maybe you have some medical issues and you need a nurse to come and check up on you or things like that. So for way into the future, right? I mean, maybe you're not thinking about that now, maybe you are, but everybody is going to get older, and so eventually you may need assisted living, and so you can use that money then for that purpose. So quite useful to, again, make use of that account if you have access to it. Okay, next, do you have children and a wish to help pay for some or all of their college expenses? So now it's not so much about you anymore, but it's about your kids. So if you want to save, right, for children, and it doesn't need to be your child, it could be another child as well. It could be your niece, your nephew, something like that. Evaluate available savings investment options, such as a 529 plan. So that is a college savings plan. And different states in the US offer different plans like that. So this is definitely something worth Googling and reading up on if you want to start saving and investing for your child's future, especially if you think they might want to use that college fund. Or for your own college savings. If you think, 5 years from now, maybe I want to use that money for college, that might be useful as well. Now, the other thing is that even though initially you might put that college fund in somebody's name, in your nephew's name, but then maybe your nephew doesn't end up going to college, well, you can change that to the beneficiary so that it goes to somebody else, so that it becomes maybe for your niece, right? So, and then, that might be useful, but it would have to be used for a qualified educational expense. Okay, so next step. At this point, you have some options on how to proceed. So we're almost at the end, and it is completely up to you and your personal goals and desires. So here, this is where you're starting to be more free, right? You don't have to worry as much about all the little things. It's now starting to get to the final stage. So again, let me just move this up a little bit. Alrighty. So now we're getting to the final stage. So this really splits into two sections. The one is, would you like to retire early? So I already mentioned that retirement is not an age, as seen here, retire early, right? And this hints to the next step as well, which will basically be the FIRE movement, right? So FIRE stands for financial independence, retired early. And I'll probably do more videos on that stuff as well. But if you would like to retire early, then you're going to try to save even more, right? So here we go. We're going to try to max out that 401k, maybe a 403b or other employer-sponsored accounts, right? Could be military accounts or other or educational, government-based accounts. Consider the Mega Backdoor Roth IRA account. Then use a taxable account. Okay, so a taxable account is pretty straightforward. That means an individual brokerage account. There are no tax advantages in that account. So you can just invest in stocks, invest in mutual funds, invest in ETFs, bonds as well, money market funds. But you won't be able to shield that from, if you have any capital gains, you won't be able to shield that from, taxes. You're going to need to pay taxes on the capital gains. Now, let's talk briefly about the Mega Backdoor Roth, right? So the Mega Backdoor Roth, how does it work? Well, it goes through your 401k. So the first thing is that you need to have access to a 401k. If you don't have a 401k, then you won't be able to do the Mega Backdoor Roth. And so I'm first going to explain in large steps what the Mega Backdoor Roth is. So here in the 401k, we already mentioned that we have 19,500, right, as the limit, right? So that is the pre-tax limit. So here we have a portion that is pre-tax. Okay, cool. And let's say your employer matches another, let's say $5,000. Let's just make the numbers easy. So here, $5,000 is money that, the employer matches. So this will be the match. And this is also pre-tax. So pre-tax. So we're not done yet. There is actually more money that you can add to this. So basically here, 19,500. So if we add these two up, we are hitting $24,500. So that is currently what is being added to your 401k, right, on a yearly basis. Okay, but some plans, some 401k plans allow you to contribute even more. They allow you to contribute post-tax contribution. And so the total limit, as we were hinting at before, right, is not the 19,500. And by the way, the 19,500 limit is your employee contribution limit. That does not include the match. So you can indeed contribute up to 19,500 and your employer will basically match another 500. So at that point, you have pushed in $24,000. Okay, great. So next, let's keep going. And so what else can we do? Well, the total limit is 57,000. So I'll call this one, you know, the sort of the total limit is $57,000. Now that can be a combination of that pre-tax. So we've already got 24,500, and let's have a quick look how much that is going to be. If we say 57,000 minus the 24,500 is going to be $32,500. All right, so here, if we take the difference, right, minus that 24,500 equals 32,500. And this portion that we have over here can be contributed as a post-tax amount. So this over here is going to be post-tax. All right, but now for a second, take a step back and think, you know, why would I want to contribute this money and get it to be stuck in a 401k? Well, the point is not to get it stuck into a 401k. The point is then to roll that money over to do an in-service withdrawal, but to roll that money over into a Roth IRA. So now that post-tax money over here, this portion of it is going to get rolled over into, so we'll call that a rollover. Oops, roll over in Roth IRA. Remember that limit, that Roth IRA limit of $6,000, right? Wait a second, this is $32,000. So in 1 year, there are ways to get up to $38,000 into your Roth IRA by making use of the Mega Backdoor Roth. That is amazing to be able to do that. That is crazy, and you know, it's a large amount that can become shielded, because once it is in the Roth IRA, it is tax shielded. So basically, this is now $32,000 that is going to be added to your Roth IRA. And so that is the goal. The goal is not to get it stuck into your 401k. It's basically through the 401k, the post-tax contribution gets rolled over into a Roth IRA. And from there, you can do whatever you want with it. You can invest it. You know, you can even take the money out again, because it's post-tax. So you have already paid the taxes on it. But the purpose is not, so why would you want to get it into the Roth IRA? Again, once it is in the Roth IRA, you are going to shield it from any future capital gains. That is one of the biggest advantages of the Roth IRA. So here, once it's in the Roth IRA, it is shielded from capital gains taxes. And that is what you're after, capital gains taxes. Cool. So that's why you want to get into the Roth IRA. All right, let's go back up to the other goal. Do you have more immediate goals? So, I mean, one of those goals could be buying a car, buying a house, you know, big items, big purchases. So here we can see use savings for goals sooner than 3 to 5 years, a conservative mix of stocks and bonds for goals more than 3 to 5 years away. So that depends a little bit on how aggressive you want to be with it and how easily you want to be able to access that money. Are there transaction fees that you have to consider? Are there early withdrawal penalties? Or is it literally something that you'll need next month or a year from now, right? A down payment on a house, or maybe a down payment on a car as well. Things that you'll need, a lot earlier. So here, common examples include down payments for homes, savings for vehicles, paying down a mortgage, and vacation funds. So yeah, that basically shows the entire chart. Now there's a little bit more information here on the side, and I do want to read that because it is good information. And it's a bit of a disclaimer as well. So let's get into this. So here, a note on entertainment expenses, right? So entertainment expenses, those are the discretionary spending. So what is that, right? We talked about this before. These are the wants, right? We talked about the needs and the wants. So the needs are the essential things, right? Everything that you have to have. And the wants is called discretionary spending. So, however, if you're dedicated to achieving financial health and getting rid of debt, it is best to keep discretionary spending at an absolute minimum until your high interest debt and possibly moderate interest debt is paid off. Informed decision making paired with common sense can be a great tool to employ while forming a healthy financial strategy. All right, so, all right, what does that mean? Right over here, that entire paragraph basically means try not to spend too much money on frivolous things or on discretionary items, on luxury things. There is a mentality, especially in the next stage over here with the FIRE community, to be conscious about your spending. It is okay to spend money, but spend it on things that you think are going to give you happiness, that are going to give you joy, and even then be somewhat selective. Maybe realize that you have the option to buy something. That doesn't mean you have to buy it. You can afford it. That doesn't mean you should buy it. Maybe that money is better spent or used to buy mutual funds, to buy ETFs, to buy more stocks that pay you more dividends, right? And build your passive income. And then maybe, this is what I do, you use a percentage of your passive income as sort of a way of saying, okay, this is money that I'm just going to spend on, I don't know, going out for dinner or going on a vacation or, buying, something. All right, disclaimer. This chart is a supplemental guide. There are circumstances where you may need to alter your approach, such as earning income that exceeds the Roth IRA limit. We talked about those limits, right? That's the $129,000 for a single, and also for the married couple somewhere near the $200,000, thus creating a need to pursue backdoor Roth contributions. So I explained the mega backdoor Roth. The backdoor Roth is similar in the sense that, similar, but it doesn't go through your 401k. It goes through a traditional IRA. And so how does that work? Well, basically you contribute to a traditional IRA first, the $6,000, because that does not have an earned income limit. So you can contribute $6,000 to your traditional IRA. And then once that money is in the account, you basically roll it over into a Roth IRA. And that is completely legal. You can totally do that in 2020. So that is referred to as the backdoor Roth contribution. To make optimal financial decisions for your unique situation, that's the debt payment, Snowball versus Avalanche, Roth versus traditional, etc. It is vital to spend the time cultivating the necessary knowledge enabled you to move forward from an informed place of strength. I 100% agree with that. One of the first things I say to people is, the market is going to be there tomorrow, the stock market and so on, investments will be there tomorrow. Educate yourself, right? That is so important so that you know the right steps. And hopefully you have found this chart useful. It has definitely been extremely useful to point people in the right direction. It has helped me as well personally. So I highly recommend it. Also, I do want to give a shout out to the persons and the people that made this. So this is a Reddit user. I don't know who it is, but it is called Atlas Void. This was in 2016. Flowchart created by Beached 89. So these users, they did a great job with figuring out this chart. So again, super useful stuff. And so it's a big chart and there's a lot to learn, but hopefully this was helpful to you. If you did enjoy this, please like and subscribe on the video, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Also, if you have any suggestions or any feedback, any comments, please, write them down below, and I'll take a look at them and try to reply. Thank you so much. Have a good one, and see you in the next video. Cheers. Bye-bye.